I am pregnant with my boyfriend's baby. My boyfriend, let's call him Joe, and I have been close friends for 4 years. I fell for him, and 2 years ago I asked him out. He was ecstatic. I was so happy with him. He is sweet, caring, humble, and we love each other. We have a solid relationship built on friendship, trust, and love. We found out 7 months ago that I was pregnant. The problem is I was adamant since I was 18 that I never wanted to be a mom. Not because I hate children, but because I strongly believe that if I can't give a child all the love it deserves, then I have no right to be a mom, and I thought I couldn't. When I found out I was pregnant, instead of dread, I felt confused, which is not normal for me. My boyfriend knows how I feel about it and says he wants a partner more than children and is happy with our cats. So when I showed up at his place crying and told him, he held me and told me he loved me and that this changes nothing. We talked a lot that night. He was surprised that I was thinking about keeping our baby. We talked a lot the next couple of days about it. We decided we wanted to keep my baby, and he said he was never going anywhere. I love him, and I know we will be happy together with our son. My 2 best friends, Sarah and Kim, were surprised that I was keeping it, but they seemed happy for me. Kim told her mom, and my parents found out. Last week, they called me and berated me for not telling them. They disowned me 7 years ago when my ex-husband Dan divorced me because I didn't want to have children. Before we started to date, while we were engaged and married, I always made sure he knew that. It wasn't something that was brought up often, but he knew I didn't want children. He said he was okay with it, and I believed him. My parents, mostly my mom, weren't happy about me not wanting kids, but they have my older sister's kids. So it wasn't that bad with my parents at the time. A couple of years into our marriage, he started to pressure me, and I told him again that children were off the table, so he eventually made an ultimatum: children or divorce. I asked him why he said that, and he thought I would change my mind. It made me so sad, and my family only made it worse. They called me names, said and did things, and his family was just as bad. It broke me for a while, so I left, started therapy, and took up yoga. I got better. It took a couple of years, but I did it, and that's about the time I met Joe. My parents are blowing up my phone and demanding I go back to them and are mad that I'm not married. My sister is indifferent. We are no contact. Things escalated when Dan found out. He doesn't have my number, so he has been attacking me on social media. I tried to explain to them that people change. My Joe said he supports me. We moved in together a few months ago, so I didn't think my parents would be able to find me since it's a new address. But they did. They drove 2 hours to visit me. When they arrived, they started to bother me and bombard me with inappropriate questions and accusations. It worsened when they met Joe. They asked him a bunch of intrusive questions in a rude tone. He answered all of them. His age was brought up and he was honest. Well, my mom didn't take the news well and called me a cradle robber and a bad name. Joe looked like he wanted to hurt them, but told them to leave or he would call the police. They didn't believe him, so he called someone. My parents left. It turned out he just called his parents. They have been very supportive. My sister called later that night and called Joe and me some names. So my question is, how do I make my family leave me alone, and what precautions should I take? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. The only voice you need to trust is your own inner voice. Block them. Get cameras because they sound violent. Notify the police of the situation. Block your ex's account. He's hurt right now. Your family is hurt too. Their lives are probably going downhill and they need someone to blame. Just don't pay any mind to any of their words because it's been 7 years. You all are strangers now. Comment 2. Yeesh. He is 28, not 18. People change their minds all the time. Surround yourself with supportive people, and anyone else can kick rocks unless they are truly able to change. And keep a slightly open mind on that. When a new baby comes around, sometimes people get their acts together. But you don't owe them a relationship. Congratulations to you, and hang in there, mama. Now, for the update. It's been about a week since my parents showed up at my house, uninvited, and things have been kind of quiet on their end, which is a nice change. Honestly, Joe and I have been trying to keep our distance from them as much as possible, but that's easier said than done. They just won't go away, like ever. My parents have been blowing up our phones with texts demanding that we meet with them. It's like, what part of no do they not understand? I completely ignored their texts, focusing on getting ready for the baby and just trying to live my life. Then, my sister Kate started texting me, trying to convince me to see our parents. I didn't respond to her because I didn't want to deal with any of this, but she decided to show up at my door anyway, like some kind of bad horror movie. She insisted that we needed to talk and that our parents were worried about me. I told her straight up that I didn't want to discuss anything with them, like at all. She kept insisting, saying they just wanted to understand my choices. I told her that their understanding was not my concern. She left in a huff, saying I was being unreasonable. I don't know what her deal is, to be honest. It's like she forgot how crappy they treated me. Then, the next day I got a call from Dan, my ex-husband, and let me tell you, he was not happy. He was all upset that I was having a baby with Joe and not with him. Like, dude, that ship has sailed. I told him to stay out of my business, but he had the nerve to threaten me. He said he would tell my parents about my poor choices. I just blocked his number and moved on with my life. Days passed, and then my parents showed up again. This time, they came with gifts, which was just bizarre. They knocked on the door, and I refused to answer because honestly I didn't want to deal with them. Joe was furious and wanted to confront them. I told him it wasn't worth it, but he went outside anyway. He told them to leave our property or he'd call security. They left, but not before my mom shouted that I was ruining my life. I mean, she's not wrong, but she doesn't get a say in it. After that, I decided to take a different approach. I contacted a local journalist who had done stories on family estrangement before. I told them about my situation and how my parents were intruding in my life. The journalist agreed to write an article about families that pressure their children, which was really all I wanted. The article was published online, and my parents were named in it, which was kind of what I wanted. The article went viral in our town, and suddenly they were getting a ton of calls and messages from people they knew. My parents tried to reach out again after that, but I ignored their calls. I also got a text from Dan, and he was furious that I made him look bad publicly. I told him to deal with it because it wasn't my problem, not even a little bit. The day after that, my parents showed up at Joe's family's dinner, which was just awkward for everyone. They were met with cold stares from his family, who knew the story. Joe stood up and told them they were not welcome, which made everyone feel a little better. They left in shame, but not before my mom gave me one last judgmental look. The article also had some unintended consequences for Dan, who faced a lot of backlash from his family. They were not happy with him at all, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit satisfied by that. My parents have been really quiet since then. No more texts, no more calls. It's like they've finally gotten the message, and honestly, it's about time. Mini update. My sister Kate and ex-husband Dan have been causing issues on their own. Dan threatened to tell my parents about my life choices, but I blocked him. Kate insisted we talk, but I refused. After ignoring her, she showed up at my door, which was incredibly frustrating. Am I the idiot lit for refusing to abandon my dog after my roommate tried to force me out with lies? For some background, I adopted my dog Ruby from a shelter 4 years ago. At the time, I lived alone and was mostly working from home. About 2.5 years ago, I was promoted into a position that required me to travel a lot for work. My parents live only 30 minutes away from me, so I had to come to a joint custody arrangement with them and Ruby, since I was out of town for at least 1/3 of every month. Ruby is very sweet and very well behaved. My parents absolutely adore her, and she adores them, so it was a perfect arrangement. Recently, my company offered me a pay raise to relocate to a different city. It would involve a bit less travel. Conveniently, I have an old college friend, Tamara, who already lives in this new city. When I told her that I was moving there, she mentioned that she was looking for a new, bigger place and would love to go in on a nicer apartment with me. Tamara and I get along well, and we had good luck finding a great rental with plenty of space for both of us. Tamara has a cat. It is something that we discussed before we signed our lease. I told her that I have a dog who is very friendly towards other animals, but I explained that Ruby would be in our place while I was traveling since I would no longer be able to house her with my parents. Tamara told me she had no problem with Ruby. I said that I would hire a dog sitter while I was away, but Tamara said she would feed her and walk her while I was away, which would now only be a handful of days each month. We moved in last week, and I wasn't able to bring Ruby with me right away. We made plans for my parents to drive her out next weekend, and in the meantime, we would share some of Ruby's things with Tamara's cat to get him used to the scent and such. To my surprise, Tamara's cat has been very grumpy, hissing at me a lot or swiping if I get too close to him. She told me that he was stressed about moving, and I took her word for it and just gave him space for a few days. On Saturday, Tamara told me she doesn't want Ruby living in our apartment. She said her cat is not very friendly around other animals or other people, and she doesn't want to stress him out further by bringing in another pet. I was livid at this since we had discussed pet arrangements beforehand, and she assured me her cat would be okay with it. I asked her what she expected me to do with my dog, and she said I should just give Ruby to my parents completely since they are used to watching her when I am away. I had a conversation with my parents about this, and they are upset for me, but also told me they would have no problem taking Ruby permanently or until I no longer live with Tamara. I told Tamara that I would either be bringing Ruby to our apartment or I would have to break our lease, which I really don't want to do. All she said was she was going to prioritize her cat in this situation and do what was best for him. I have literally no idea what to do. I love my dog so much. I can't imagine leaving her behind completely. I feel so betrayed by Tamara that I don't even want to live with her anymore, but it would cost a fortune to break the lease and then find a new apartment by myself, though it feels like that is my only option. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. What's the penalty for you for breaking the lease? She knew the dog was part of the deal. If she changes what she'll tolerate in week 1, who knows what she'll demand in the coming months. Usually, leases require you to mention if you're bringing pets. If it says dog, you can remind her that's the agreement she signed. Legally, can she really stop you? I'm not sure she can if it was mentioned in writing. She's also being unreasonable. If you walk away from this lease today, she's on the hook for the full rent. Maybe she thinks she has the power to dictate terms because you're here but the dog isn't. You can call her bluff. She's a very inconsiderate friend. Comment 2. Color me confused. Why does she get to dictate whether or not your dog lives there if it's stated in the lease? I think it's crazy to expect someone else to take care of your dog while you're gone instead of boarding or something, and you can tell she's going to accidentally lose your dog. So I would leave your dog with your parents and then break the lease. But seriously, what a terrible person. Now for the update. It's been 2 weeks since I moved in with Tamara. My parents brought my dog Ruby over last weekend. The first night with Ruby in the new apartment went well. Tamara's cat Luna seemed cautious but curious about Ruby. The next day I got home from work to find a mess. Tamara was upset because Luna had knocked over a plant in panic. She said Ruby couldn't stay, claiming Luna was too stressed. I reminded her of our agreement about the pets, but she suggested I find Ruby another home. I argued that Ruby was family and wouldn't be rehomed. Things got heated, leading to a big argument in the living room. I took Ruby for a walk to calm down. While out, my parents called, worried about the situation with Tamara. I explained everything, feeling frustrated about the lack of support. They offered to take Ruby back, but I said no. I went back home, determined to fix things. Tamara had already talked to her friends about it, looking for their support. I overheard her talking about getting a restraining order against Ruby. I confronted her about it, but she claimed she wasn't safe with Ruby around, even though Ruby was calm. I suggested we get a pet behaviorist for advice, but she refused, saying her cat's well-being was more important. I proposed separating the pets when we were away, but she accused me of being selfish and not caring for Luna. The argument got worse, and she threatened to break the lease. The next day, I found a notice on the door about a rent increase. Tamara was mad about the unexpected news and blamed me. I reached out to the landlord to ask about the rent increase. The landlord was firm about the increase due to rising costs in the area. I went home to talk about the news with Tamra, hoping to find a solution. She was already planning to move out and suggested I do the same. She packed her things, saying she wouldn't live with Ruby any longer. I watched helplessly as she left, taking her cat with her. I sat in the empty apartment. I reached out to my parents for support, who offered to help with moving. I decided to keep Ruby. I faced challenges finding a new place that allowed pets. After days of searching, I found a pet-friendly apartment. I moved into the new apartment, ready to start fresh with Ruby. Honestly, this whole situation has been a roller coaster, and I just feel a mix of relief and exhaustion. Like, I thought Tamara and I could make this work, but the stress over our pets was just too much. Now that I found this new place, it feels good to start over with Ruby. I just want to focus on her happiness and get back to enjoying our time together. Thanks for all the support and kind words. Edit. I want to clarify that the rent increase notice was indeed a tactic by Tamara to get me to leave. After she left, she admitted to some friends that she had reported false information to the landlord. I have since spoken to the landlord and assured him that I will not be getting a dog sitter. Am I the idiot for asking my wife to contribute financially and being blamed for our marriage falling apart? I really need some advice because I am really struggling with how to move forward. My wife, who is 33 years old, and I, who am 29 years old, have been through a very rough period over the last year and have now reached a point where we both must make decisions. My wife is a United States citizen and is living in the United Kingdom on a spousal visa. In October of last year, she accused me of having an affair. I have not had one, but she believes that I have. This escalated severely when she approached my family and, while not directly asking them to, ended up with my sister and my mother cyberbullying a friend of mine and calling me names and being generally mean. Prior to this time, I was having doubts about our relationship, but I didn't say anything. I didn't know how, and that's my fault, and didn't help the situation. During our marriage, I have been the only one working. She started a small business, which I was happy to support while I could afford to do so. The situation has now changed, and I've made it clear that she needs to contribute to the bills at the very least, as I feel it's fair. She sees this as wrong and has also convinced my family of the same. She comes from a well-off family, and I do not, so she can afford it if necessary. I was also coming off medication at the request of my partner at the time, as she thought it was affecting me. It was a bad idea in hindsight, as it made my depression really quite bad, and I became just angry with the entire situation, and we had lots of fights because of it. I have now made it very clear that I want out of the relationship, but she, my family, and her family are not happy with this decision. Now, the complicated part of this is the visa. She wants to remain in the United Kingdom, as she is a military brat, and therefore hasn't really had a home of her own before. She wants that in the United Kingdom, and subsequently with my family, as they all love her, especially my sister, who hasn't spoken to me for a while but sees her every week. I do not know what conversations have been had, but I know she's spoken to an immigration lawyer about options. I suspect they are going to try and make me out as emotionally hurtful based on comments, but I genuinely don't know, and she refuses to tell me anything to even help her because it's my fault that she's in this situation. I've made it clear that I want to move out. She cried and said I was abandoning her. So I said I'd wait until April to allow her to get a job and figure her own stuff out. But I am now really struggling mentally, physically, and emotionally. I want to just leave, but is that wrong of me? I fear that by doing so, my familial situation gets worse and I become an outcast. She is not a bad person. I have a lot to blame for this situation too, but we've gone too far now, and I think that distance is necessary. I'm just not sure what to do or how to even afford leaving, as I can't really pay a deposit for a new apartment. What do you think I should do? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Divorce. She doesn't trust you and then purposely turned your family against you. That level of insecurity and immaturity means that this relationship isn't sustainable. It's inevitable. Do it now in a thoughtful manner, or be forced to do it later when things have gotten even worse. Comment 2. In your position, I would be saying something like, she falsely accused me of having an affair. She got 2 of you involved in insulting me. She's contributing nothing to the bills, and she's not trying to. If you want to keep her in the family, fine. You marry her. Now, for the update, I'm sharing an update on my divorce situation. A week after I posted, I found my wife packing her things late at night. She said she was going to stay with her sister for a while. I asked if everything was okay, and she snapped that she just needed space. Then her sister texted me, asking for a family meeting to talk about the situation. I reluctantly agreed to meet at a restaurant. During the meeting, her sister accused me of pushing my wife away with my demands. I defended myself, saying I just wanted my wife to help out financially. Her sister then said that our parents were worried about my wife's mental health. After that meeting, I decided to go to my wife's family home to talk directly with her. When I got there, I found the door open and heard loud voices inside. I stepped in and found my wife arguing with her parents about staying with me. Her mom insisted she deserves better treatment than what I provide. My wife then texted me, saying she was moving out for good. I confronted my parents during a family dinner at their house. They expressed concern about my mental state, suggesting I might be pushing everyone away. I tried to explain my struggles, but they didn't really listen. That week, I noticed my wife changed her social media status to single. I found out through mutual friends that she was dating someone new. I started looking for a temporary rental to get some independence back. While searching, I bumped into an old friend who offered to let me stay at their place. I started going to a local community center to meet new people. During a game night, I overheard a couple talking about relationship advice, which really hit home. I reached out to an old mentor for career advice, trying to get some confidence back. The mentor encouraged me to invest in my own goals, which I had ignored for years. I took a chance and signed up for a course related to my passion. My family had mixed reactions to me going after my ambitions. Amid all this, I learned my wife had filed for separation, making things even more complicated. I felt awful as I read through the legal documents, realizing things were getting serious. Edit: my wife is still dating the other person. I am now officially separated. I moved into a temporary rental and started the course. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.